my name is Thomas McClellan, and I work for a company called Symantec. And we are, just a boast, we are the world's largest cybersecurity company. We're in about 160 countries around the world. We have about 220 million endpoints. We've got about 13,000 folks. We've got about 3,500 folks doing nothing but intelligence and analysis. And all that information gets wrapped up into what we call the ISTR, the Internet Security Threat Report. And so a lot of what I'm going to talk about today kind of draws from that information from around the world. And that's really the only salesy thing you're going to get from me all day. My role at the company is to head up government affairs and policy. And so toward that end, and just so you know, the timer's not running, so I'll keep an eye on my watch. So toward that end, my job is to go out and brief folks around threats, brief folks around what the trends are around the country. And so I travel quite a bit. I'm headquartered in DC, although I'm on the road pretty significantly. And so by way of background, I'm a policy wonk. I spent about 17 years with this group called the National Governors Association, worked very closely with Governor Hickenlooper on a great effort looking at prescription drug abuse reduction. Our goal was to reduce deaths and overdose. So I love coming back out to Colorado. I got the chance to hike out at St. Mary's Glacier yesterday. Absolutely gorgeous. So with that in mind, so what I want to talk today is about the impact of market forces. And it comes down to this, is that cybersecurity is this thing, and the challenge as a speaker, as a presenter, when you do these type of events, is there's such an uneven level of what people understand. And so I'm going to try to hit all the different levels. I am not a technology guy. I understand it to a point. Excuse me. I'm more of a strategist, and so I'm going to think about things in terms of trends and what it means for you. And there's been some disturbing things taking place in the last couple months if you haven't been paying attention. And so, do you guys remember the I love you? Who here got hit by I love you? Who here knows what I'm talking about? Just a few. So I love you was this annoying little virus that came out in May 2000. And I remember the morning, I was working at NGA in DC, right up on Capitol Hill, and I get this email from a colleague of mine, Dane Lynn. I said, Dane, you love me? I love you right back, buddy. And it was just this virus. It was just an annoyance. But what happened after that is that we started seeing, the point is this, we've gone from paper-based, we've gone to these very ancient computers. Then all of a sudden we've gone to these high-speed, high-powered computers. And then beginning around 2000 and then moving into the 14s, we saw this spike in ransomware. We saw this spike in malware. We saw bad guys beginning to figure out how to weaponize things. Does anybody know who this is? Nobody? Why do you rob banks? It's where the money's at. And so this is where, and the quote really isn't attributed, is not historically attributed to him, but everyone gives it to him. So the notion is the bad guys are going to be motivated by the same kind of rationality that markets are. So the bad guys are going to go where the money is. So when you take a look at I love you, whoops. So the I love you, there was no value, there was no money to it. This was just an annoyance. But then all of a sudden, the bad guys started figuring out, hey, we can begin to weaponize things that we send around, and they go after the money. And that's where we saw this big spike in ransomware, where people were getting their computers taken over. If you want to get your pictures back, if you want to get your income tax returns back, if you want to get, and then what happened was there was this spike in ransomware. But then all of a sudden, a couple years ago, things started changing. And I'm cutting out about 10 years or 12 years. This is because it's abbreviated talk here. But do you all understand cryptocurrencies? So you can use your own computer. I don't understand the process totally, but you can use your computer to begin to generate cryptocurrencies by using your CPU. The bad guys, where the money's at, figured out, hey, we're seeing now diminishing returns in ransomware, so now we're going to do cryptocurrency. So we're going to steal your CPU, and they're either going to put on malware on your computer or you're going to go to an infected site. And the notion is this. Bad guys, they figure out they've gone from being a nuisance to how we weaponize, how we monetize it. So now people are beginning to secure and back up their stuff. You want a ransomware? I don't care. I'm just going to restart my system. I've got everything stored somewhere else. Then the bad guys say, hey, you know what? We're going to go after coin. We're going to start doing coin mining operations, and so we saw a huge spike. But then something else changed over the last couple of years. The value of cryptocurrencies have declined. And what that means, again, market forces, the bad guys are going to begin to think, well, you know what? If there's such a drop in the value, and you look at the market caps and you look at all of it, it's harder for them to make money. So the bad guys are going to do the next thing. And you know what the next thing is? Form jacking. Have any of y'all heard of form jacking? So have you all ever gone to a gas station where something looks a little hinky about when you put your credit card in? So form jacking is essentially the same type of thing as that, but it's just over the internet. What the bad guys do is they skim off the data for credit cards coming in. And they've discovered that you can make money doing this. Whoops, sorry. That they can make money at it. But in the meantime, we're seeing a new evolution taking place in ransomware right now. Whereas early on in the 2010s to the 15s and so forth, we saw the typical attack was against more consumers, more individuals. But what we've seen now, the thing he's got right there, it's getting harder for the bad guys to do the ransomware on all these mobile devices. So what the bad guys are doing now is they're going after businesses. They're going after enterprises. And kind of one of the unique thing about businesses is that businesses generally will not tell you if they're victims because it's not good for business. Sometimes they have to, but governments do. And so we've seen this kind of interesting change take place. So when you look at these consumers, let me just do it this way. So in 2016, nearly 70% of all these ransomware attacks were against consumers. 2017, it's only 41%. In 2018, it's now 19%. So what they're doing is they're going after where the money is. And where the money is now is in enterprise. The other thing that's taking place is that the I love you is this thing, it was like Flowers for All. It was a virus that people put out there. Some of the other fly-by-night ransomware attacks, these Flowers for All, they were undirected. They were just launched on the internet or through email, propagated through email or worms or viruses. But now the bad guys are saying, hey, we're going to go after these things, but we're going to go after them much more focused. And so what we've seen, excuse me, what we've seen is a tremendous growth in these targeted attacks taking place. And so when you begin to think about the trends that are out there and what that means for you all, first off, just quick, how many people work for the state? How many people are local governments? How many people would consider themselves technologists? Okay, that's good. So whatever level you're at, you have to kind of begin to think about what it is, where are the bad guys going? Where are the trends, and how do I allocate my scarce resources? Now, there's one thing in this talk that I'm not hitting today, is this notion is that, so we at Symantec, we kind of break things up into, we've got targeted attackers, and then we've had, criminal groups. And one of the interesting things that we've seen for some of these targeted attackers is that there's a whole subset of folks that are not interested in money. They're interested in subversion and destruction of things. And so we've seen attacks against infrastructure. We've seen, last year we identified something called Dragonfly, which is a piece of malware that sits on all the electric, on the power grid, the electric grid around the country. We've seen attacks against, do you guys know what WADA is? WADA is the World Anti-Doping Agency. And so WADA got hit with an attack just to destroy things. And so why do you think a well-resourced group would go after WADA? They're not getting money. subversion and sabotage. It was before the Olympics. I remember what happened with some of the teams. So in addition to all the ransomware side of things, there's a group of actors out there that want to subvert and break things, and elections is one of the prime examples. And I'm not going to talk about elections; that's a whole other talk. But when you begin to think about the evolution of all this, and in your capacity, in your roles, when you begin to think about what it is that I need to be doing, what do I need to be thinking, motivation actually does matter in terms of thinking about planning for the next attack that's coming down. So I'm going to keep coming back to this. Spear phishing remains the primary vector for targeted attacks. So everyone likes to think cybersecurity is this incredibly, really, Men in Black or Mission Impossible kind of stuff. The way the bad guys continue to succeed, 71%. So we actively follow. We got our secret squirrels who actively follow 140 targeted attack groups. And we look and study what we call the TTPs, the techniques, tactics, and procedures of the bad guys. What is it they do? How are they successful? How are they getting to where they're getting, and how are they being successful in doing what they're doing? And they're not sending like these massive kind of cool codes. They're sending your people a targeted attack crafted to you that gets open. So we've seen bad guys change what it is that they're doing, from nuisance, I love you, to ransomware for all, to targeted attacks. So what does this mean for you all? It means that the bad guys are moving with some kind of rationality. Now, there are a couple schools of thought. Anybody here an economist? Good. So there are a couple schools of thoughts here that markets act rationally, and some people argue that markets act irrationally. I'm just saying that you have to begin to think about what it means for you all when the bad guys, because when the bad guys see and I divide folks into two categories. There are the haves and there are the have-nots. And so there are some bigger cities, New York, Miami, LA, they've got tremendous resources, capabilities, people. Then you have other cities that are smaller. And so the bad guys ask themselves, do I want to try to go over this wall? Or do I want to go over that one? And so they may start thinking about, boy, do I try to go after New York? And maybe they're still going to go after them. Or do I want to go after Boulder? It's a smaller city. Maybe they don't have the same resources. Is anybody here from Boulder? Good, let's pick on them. That when you think about what's taking place right now, we've seen these attacks against Atlanta's not a mid-tier city. Atlanta's a big city. So we've seen these bad guys not going after everybody. They're targeting their attacks now. And I want to point out in this, I don't know if y'all can see that, it says another $9.5 million to fix. So they've already spent a chunk of change. And this is trying to getting to the point about thinking about how to react to some of this stuff. Baltimore just got hit. Baltimore got crushed. And one of the things about Baltimore that may or may not be evident to a lot of folks is the fact that Baltimore didn't have cyber insurance. So they're going to end up having to pay for all the fixes out of their own budget. And Baltimore's hurting on budget anyways. I live just outside there. But this is frightening to me. Now, we don't know what's taking place in private businesses. We've got, obviously, we have some of our clients, and the advice generally is don't pay. Did anybody hear what took place in Florida last month? Last month? 2 cities got hit. 2 cities got hit and publicly came out and paid ransom. One paid $600,000. One paid either $530,000 or right around $500,000. Huh? I'm Willie Hutton. I'm going to go where the money is. So what does that mean? That's what it means. What it means in the business, you don't have to recreate everything. The bad guys are lazy. They don't want to go over the big wall. They want to go over the little wall. So what does that mean? So we've got the bad guys acting with some kind of rationality. They know that now, right now, we've got a formula that works. We don't have to go after the big dogs. We're going after these little mid-tier places, counties, cities, and you know, if I can make 500,000 going after a smaller city, great. I don't need to make the million, but if I can do that, so that's pretty scary, and that is a big trend for you all to think about. The bad guys will not go after the big wall. So if you are a little dog and your security isn't up to where it needs to be, you need to begin to think about, I am a target. I probably am a target. So what does it mean? So here's what it means. So what? I got 4 minutes, perfect. Don't wait. If you think, oh, I got a buddy of mine who runs a multi-million-dollar business, and we've had these discussions. He goes, oh, they got nothing I want. I said, you're nuts. You've got something that they want, and it's cash. And they'll figure out a way to monetize it. That's what they do. So don't wait. Go back now. And the other thing you need to do is you have to change your position from, here's the line. I'm going to beef up the line because I don't want these guys coming in to saying, there are bad guys on the stage. They're in my systems right now. I'm going to go hunt them. They're in there, and they are in there. So here's a good number to remember: 191. Does anyone know what that number means? 191 is the average dwell time that the bad guys are in your network before they launch their attacks. They're in your networks. So when you think about what your posture is, we talk a lot in the business about cybersecurity posture and what your posture is. Think about the fact that the bad guys are probably already in your network. So 191 days, what happens during that time is that the bad guys will get in through a spear phishing attack. They'll get in your system. They'll increase their ability to kind of move within your system. The attacks against Atlanta and I believe Baltimore. I know Baltimore in the end was a Robin Hood, but it was launched by it was called a SamSam attack. And so the SamSam gets in. It's basically a beachhead. It allows the bad guys to get in and move around, position their attack, figure out how to monetize it, use some kind of rationality, and then launch the attack. And they have a lot of time to do that. And so you need to be in there and you need to be hunting. Cybersecurity, this whole notion of enterprise governance, and it's good to have the elected officials here because cybersecurity is not an IT issue. It is a core business function. And for it to be a core business function, you need to have an enterprise-wide governance structure that doesn't reside just in the CIO's office or the CISO's office or the CTO's office. It cuts across everything. And individuals in your organizations are probably doing things that they shouldn't be doing at the highest levels and at the lowest levels. And you need some kind of governance structure. Does everyone here know what the NIST framework is? So the National Institute of Standards and Technology has created a voluntary standard for cybersecurity that anybody can use in any organization. The feds have to use it by law. Many states and city governments are going to use it. But you have to know where you rank up on this. They have what they call critical controls and other things that you can go through and do an assessment in your own system. Get up to speed on NIST. Minute 30, I'm doing good. Budgeting and procurement. One of the big challenges, as we talked about this morning, is that the bad guys can move fast. They only need to be right once out of 1,000, but the bad guys can also move fast, and technology evolves at blinding speed when you think about IoT, Internet of Things. And the challenge that you all in the state government and local governments have to deal with, even the Fed to a lesser extent, is that budgeting practices don't keep up with kind of what the need is. It has to be a move from CapEx expenditures to OpEx. Cybersecurity and technology is an ongoing expense. And you have to figure out some kind of rational explanation, a rational proportion of what your IT spend should be overall. In some countries, it's as high as 12 or 15%. In states, it's generally like 3%, which is pretty low. Know the threats and get briefed. If you don't know, if you've got people in your organizations who are fighting these things every day, ask them. Say, where are we? What are our threats? What are our vulnerabilities? And they're different. And what does it mean? So there's one other market force that I didn't include here. And I don't want this to sound like a pitch for our company, but we're happy to take your business, is one of the challenges that state and local governments in particular face. And when you begin to think about the move from the bad guys, who are all around the world, from nuisance to flowers for all to targeted attacks to now a successful business practice, lather, rinse, repeat, is that you guys can't compete on the same playing field that other companies like Symantec and some of the other partners here can because of workforce issues. You constantly hear that there's a negative workforce issue in cybersecurity and IT. And that is a true market force that you all need to be aware of. And so you need to begin to look at how do you work together. So I mentioned, and is someone from the Secretary of State's office here? So I met with some of your people yesterday and I have blown away. They were fantastic. Some of the best technical folks I've met, and just both for state CIOs and everything else. So bully for you guys. I mean, really, really awesome. But what they're doing is what you all need to think about is how you leverage the partnerships that you've got, whether it's cross-county, cross-city. You guys are supporting all the locals in the security framework, which is awesome. We talk about it in our world as managed services. There's going to be a change coming down, and I know I'm just 1 minute over. There's going to be a change coming down in the next couple of years that there's going to be more and more of a move toward state and local governments buying managed services. You just can't afford to build your way out. You can't afford to compete with the big boys. You don't have the eyes that Symantec or some of the other partners here have around the world. We update things, in real time, and so you have to become more strategist than anything else. Well, with that in mind, I want to say thank you all. Thank you all very much for having us here. And we have a little booth by be here for a while. Yes?
With respect to the bad guys, how does it break down between the 400-pound guy and a lose on place and state actor?
That's a good question. I don't really know. But the way to look at it is like a pyramid. So if you have a pyramid, at the top of the pyramid, you're going to have these very targeted attacks done by a minority of the attackers, but they're good and they'll get in, and maybe it's 2 or 3% of the attacks. Then the other stuff on the bottom is going to be, viruses and malware just kind of propagated out there and pushed by little people, and people like you're talking about, some of the not organized folks. So the other thing to keep in mind is that the little guys can also be the big guys because you can go out and buy cybersecurity services from the bad guys. So you can say, you know what, I want to take over Colorado. You go on the dark web, you get your credentials on the dark web, and you say, I'm going to buy an attack. So you don't even have to have the technical sophistication. Well, I don't want to go over, but thank you very much. Appreciate the time.